The exact moment our marriage withered and died wasn't a tempest of fury, no cacophony of shattered glass or the violent slam of a door echoing into the night. It was a mundane Tuesday, around 8:45 p.m. The last dish had been put away, the house hushed, and she sat across from me on the sofa, lost in the luminous glow of her phone, as was her custom. I simply offered a question, a quiet, vulnerable bid for connection, devoid of expectation or demand. Do you want to come to bed with me tonight? By the way, please like and subscribe if you enjoy stories like this. She didn't even grace me with a glance. Instead, a light sigh escaped her lips, that faint dismissive sound one makes when a trivial chore interrupts an engrossing television show. Then the words, delivered with a chilling calm, utterly devoid of warmth, as if reciting a news headline, "I think once a month is enough." Just like that. No preamble, no warning, no tenderness. Finally, her gaze met mine, and I swear there was nothing there. No flicker of anger, no shadow of sorrow, only an unsettling apathy. She might as well have been discussing laundry detergent or the merits of different coffee brands. Wait, what? I blinked, the words catching in my throat. She leaned back, phone still clutched in her hand. I mean, intimacy, sex. Once a month is plenty, don't you think? I stared, bewildered, clinging to the desperate hope that this was some twisted, sarcastic humor she believed would land. But her expression remained unchanging, unyielding, stone-cold serious. She truly meant it. That was the precise instant something within me, something I hadn't even known how to name, fractured. It's a sensation impossible to convey to those who haven't endured it. Your stomach plummets, your breath snags somewhere between your chest and throat, not from fear, but from a searing humiliation, from the staggering realization that the one you love no longer perceives you as a man. Your fundamental need for connection, for affection, for desire is no longer sacred. It's a nuisance, an optional task crowding her mental calendar. I was paralyzed, rooted to the spot, feeling more utterly rejected in my own living room than I had ever felt in my entire existence. I had heard tales of passion fading, of couples drifting apart, but this was raw disdain, cloaked in an unsettling silence. Taking a slow, measured breath, I finally managed, "Where is this coming from?" She merely shrugged. "I don't know, it's just how I feel." "How long have you felt like that?" I pressed. "I don't know, a while. So all this time, all those nights she turned away, all those I'm tired or not tonight moments, she wasn't exhausted, she wasn't preoccupied. She simply didn't want me, not emotionally, not physically, not completely. She had unilaterally decided that our union would persist merely on paper, cohabitation, shared bills, shared space, but never shared souls. And the cruelest irony? She articulated it as if I were expected to concur, as if I'd nod and utter, "Yes, darling, once a month sounds perfectly reasonable." I couldn't, because deep within I didn't just hear, "once a month." I heard, "You don't matter to me. You are not attractive to me. You are merely a chore now." I rose, walked to the kitchen, and poured a glass of water, my hands trembling ever so slightly, not from rage, but from a profound shame. I stared out the window at the distant hum of life beyond our walls. Lawn sprinklers, a dog barking, a car pulling up across the street. Behind me, only silence. She hadn't followed, hadn't inquired if I was all right, hadn't cared that her casual declaration had plunged a dagger into the very heart of our relationship. I returned, sinking onto the far end of the couch this time. "Do you know how that made me feel?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Another shrug. "I'm just being honest." "Honesty doesn't equate to cruelty," I retorted. She sighed again, a tired, bored sound, as if the conversation itself were an unbearable burden. "I work. I have a life. I have a lot going on. And honestly, I don't think intimacy should be expected like it's a scheduled service. A scheduled service. That was the phrase she used. As if the very human desire to connect with the woman I had sworn to cherish was an inconvenience, a bothersome transaction. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't hurl insults. But something within me irrevocably shut down that night. Not my love, not yet, but my hope. In that chilling moment, I realized I could no longer entrust her with my vulnerability, my desire, my desperate emotional need to be seen and wanted by the person I had chosen. I was no longer a man in her eyes. I was a mere fixture, something to be tolerated, to be scheduled, perhaps once a month. In the aftermath, our world didn't immediately shatter. There was no climactic divorce argument. She, it seemed, believed the conversation was concluded, settled. But for me, it had just begun. I started to notice things I had long ignored. The way she smiled at her phone more than she ever smiled at me. How she never inquired about my day unless it directly impacted hers. How I could vanish for hours, unnoticed, yet forgetting almond milk, became a monumental crisis. She treated me like a utility, and I had finally read the meter. Most people believe betrayal manifests as infidelity, but there exists another, far more insidious kind of betrayal, the betrayal of neglect, of emotional starvation, of making your partner feel as if their very need for connection is an exorbitant demand when all they truly yearn for is to be wanted. And that night, the night she uttered, "Once a month is enough," was the night I finally grasped the harrowing truth. I had spent years pouring myself into someone who felt nothing for me. I slept on the couch that night. She never asked why. She didn't even look up. And as I lay there, staring at the sterile ceiling, I whispered something I had never dared to voice, not aloud, only in the silent chambers of my mind. If once a month is all I'm worth, then once a month is all you'll get. And so my retribution began, not born of rage, not of spite, but of a quiet, unyielding self-respect. People often imagine heartbreak as a loud, violent spectacle, screaming matches, doors slamming, voices shattering mid-sentence, plates crashing against walls. Movies teach us that when a loved one inflicts pain, it erupts in explosions. But for me, it didn't explode. It imploded, folding in on itself, heavy and suffocating, like a lung that suddenly forgets how to breathe. That night, after she looked me in the eye and declared, "Once a month is enough," I didn't rail. I didn't protest. I didn't beg. I simply sat there, my jaw clenched, my hands resting on my knees, fingers twitching from an internal tremor, my gaze unfocused, lost somewhere between the floor and the suffocating disappointment hanging in the air. And she, oblivious, continued scrolling on her phone, as if nothing profound had been uttered, as if she hadn't just taken the last shred of my dignity and ground it to dust with 5 casual words. I walked into the bathroom, closed the door, and stared into the mirror for a long, unsettling time. Not at my reflection, but through it. I saw a man who had given everything and asked for so little. A man who had once been playful, romantic, hungry for life. A man who had softened himself to accommodate someone who had, over time, hardened. And in return, he was being rationed like a subscription plan, once a month. That phrase echoed in my head, a scratched vinyl record over and over, once a month. It didn't even sound human. It sounded clinical, like a car maintenance schedule, not a marriage, not love, not us. I didn't sleep that night. She, meanwhile, drifted into slumber as if nothing was amiss, as if she hadn't just fired a bullet into the very core of our intimacy. I lay on the couch, watching the ceiling fan, the shadows dancing on the wall. The strange part was I wasn't angry. There was no rage, no vengeful fantasy, no mental list of accusations I yearned to scream. There was just nothing. Emptiness. The kind of silence that settles in your chest when you realize the person beside you no longer truly sees you. Perhaps they haven't in a long time, and now they're not even bothering to feign it. That was the first night something shifted within me, not because she said no, but because I finally understood the deeper message buried beneath it. It wasn't about sex. It wasn't about being tired. It wasn't about stress. It was about her rejection of me. She didn't want my hands, my presence, my effort, my energy, my intimacy. She only wanted the benefits, the comfort, the security, but the man, the human behind the husband, him she left waiting at the door. In the days that followed, I carried that pain like a silent, heavy weight in my chest. I still did the dishes, still took out the trash, still paid the bills, still folded her laundry when she left it forgotten in the dryer. I moved through the routines like muscle memory, but something in me had irrevocably died, and she didn't notice. Not when I stopped cracking jokes in the kitchen, not when I started eating dinner in silence, not when I went to bed without a good night. She didn't ask because she wasn't listening anymore. I began to withdraw from more than just her. Friends noticed first. A buddy of mine asked during lunch, "You good, man? You've been quiet lately." I nodded. Just tired. But it wasn't exhaustion. It was a profound numbness. At work, I stopped volunteering for projects, stopped speaking in meetings. I simply wanted to get through the day and escape home. Even though home no longer felt like a sanctuary, it felt like a sterile hotel, a place to rest, not to truly live. One night I tried again. We were watching a movie she liked. I wasn't even seeing it, just staring blankly at the corner of the screen, lost in thought. I turned to her. "Do you even care that we haven't been close in weeks?" She sighed, not sadly, but with an exasperated annoyance. "Are we doing this again?" My heart sank once more, as if my desire for connection was a tiresome burden she occasionally had to endure. I nodded slowly and said, "Forget it." She didn't fight for it, didn't press me to finish, didn't follow me when I left the room. And I think in that very moment I stopped trying. There's a loneliness in relationships that people rarely speak of. It's not about being alone. It's about being invisible to the one person who is supposed to see you most clearly. I began spending more time at the gym, staying later at work, sleeping on the couch, by accident more often. She never questioned it because she had already detached. She just hadn't realized I was finally matching her energy. Then one morning, a stark realization struck me. I was brushing my teeth, staring blankly at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, when a single sharp thought cut through all the fog in my head. She doesn't think you'll ever leave. That was it. She had grown so utterly comfortable with my consistency, my gentleness, my unwavering loyalty, that she simply assumed no matter how little she offered, I would perpetually show up, endlessly beg for attention, play house while starving inside. That's when something else within me shifted, something colder, stronger. I didn't yell. I didn't compose a dramatic letter. I didn't deliver a grand speech. I simply made a quiet, resolute decision. If she wanted me once a month, then once a month was all she would get. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. I began to prepare myself, emotionally, mentally, financially, not to leave just yet, but to sever the emotional leash she had kept me on for so long. I started reclaiming the parts of myself I had sacrificed to maintain an illusion of peace. And each day I became quieter, not silent from pain, but silent from a chilling clarity. Because the most dangerous man isn't the one who rages, it's the one who no longer feels the need to explain himself. I didn't tell her. I didn't need to. After that night, after she looked me in the eye and told me once a month was enough, I stopped trying to fix what she had already buried. I stopped fighting for something she had emotionally walked away from long before I ever comprehended it. I didn't scream. I didn't explain. I didn't make a dramatic exit. Instead, I made a decision, a quiet, logical one. If I was only good enough to be wanted once a month, then she would only see me once a month. That would be the new rule. Her energy mirrored. The first weekend, I said I had work to catch up on. I packed a duffel bag, a few clothes, my laptop, some books, and left early Saturday morning. No kiss goodbye, no murmured good morning. I simply walked past her as she sat at the kitchen counter sipping coffee in a robe. She didn't look up. I drove to a small Airbnb about 45 minutes out of town. Nothing fancy, just quiet, just mine. I spent the entire weekend there, reading, cooking, working out, watching the sunrise alone, and for the first time in months, I slept through the night. No cold back turned towards me in bed, no forced silence, no tension in the air so thick it constricted my chest. Just peace. I returned Sunday night. She barely reacted. "Everything okay?" she asked, glancing up from her phone. "Yeah," I said. She nodded. "You eat?" I did. That was it. No curiosity, no warmth, no affection, and inside I smiled because I knew she hadn't noticed yet. But she would. The next weekend I did it again, left Saturday morning, returned Sunday night. No explanation. I didn't answer her calls. I didn't send texts. If she asked anything when I got home, I kept it vague. Just had some stuff to clear my head. By the third weekend, she started to ask a few more questions. "You going somewhere again?" "Yeah." "Where?" Her brows furrowed, but she didn't press. She still didn't grasp it. She still thought I was simply in a mood, passive-aggressively pouting over our conversation weeks ago. But this wasn't pouting. This was discipline. By the fourth week, I changed the pattern. I stayed home that weekend, but I was a ghost. I didn't sit near her. I didn't engage in conversation unless she initiated it. I didn't touch her. I didn't ask questions. I didn't offer anything. And when Sunday night arrived, I stood up, grabbed my gym bag, and said, "See you in a few days." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I'm staying at the apartment for a bit." "Apartment?" "Yeah, rented a spot close to the office. Easier than driving back and forth." It wasn't a lie. I had rented a place, but not for convenience, for distance, for space from the woman who once begged for my presence and then treated it like a burden. Week after week, I maintained this distance. Some weekends I stayed at the apartment, some I booked a cabin, sometimes I just drove out to the countryside and sat in silence. She tried to ignore it at first, tried to act as if it didn't bother her, but I could feel her anxiety building. She started texting more, asking where I was, who I was with, why I was being so distant. I never gave full answers, just enough to keep her wondering. A month later, I came home on a Friday evening. She had cooked. Not something quick, not pasta or soup or leftovers, but a full dinner. Steak, mashed potatoes, salad. Wine poured into the good glasses. She greeted me at the door in a dress I hadn't seen in years, makeup done, hair down. She looked beautiful. More effort in that 1 hour than I'd seen in the last 12 months combined. I walked in, nodded, and said, "Smells good." She smiled softly and reached for my hand. I let her take it, but inside I felt nothing. Because I knew this wasn't love, it was fear. She felt the shift. She felt the air change. She felt the stability she once took for granted begin to slip from her fingers, and now she was scrambling. But it was too late. After dinner, she leaned in, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Come upstairs with me tonight." I smiled, the same polite smile I'd given her months earlier when she said, "Not today." And I said, "Not tonight." Her eyes flickered. Confusion first, then hurt, then disbelief. I stood up, placed my plate in the sink, and said, "Thanks for dinner. I'll be at the apartment." That was the moment she realized I was no longer reacting. I was responding. Not with drama, not with punishment, but with balance. She had set the standard once a month. Fine. I would match her rhythm. I would be there once a month, Present, cold, controlled. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to cheat. I didn't need to post pictures online to prove I was happy. I just needed to be gone. And in that absence, she finally began to feel what I had felt for months. The ache of being unseen, the weight of a house that no longer felt like home, the crushing loneliness of reaching out for someone who no longer felt warm. She started texting more, calling more, leaving notes around the house when I did show up. I miss us. Can we talk? I didn't mean it the way it came out, but I didn't respond to those either, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about self-respect. I showed up once a month, had dinner, watched a movie, slept in the guest room. She cried once. I didn't comfort her because I remembered all the nights I cried silently in the dark, and she rolled over, arms crossed, pretending not to hear. And now she would hear my silence too. At first she made nothing of it. The space I created was subtle, clean, measured. I didn't slam doors or pack suitcases in anger. I didn't give her an emotional warning shot. I didn't even break our routines loudly. I just started vanishing, one thread at a time. It began with the texts. I used to check in throughout the day. Little things like, want anything on the way home? Or just finished a meeting or dinner plans? Nothing dramatic, just signals. Signals that I was tuned in, that I cared, that she was on my radar, even amidst chaos. She never really responded with the same energy. I'd get dry replies, short ones, or nothing at all. So I stopped. One day I simply decided to match her energy. I didn't tell her. She noticed by the third day. You okay? She asked that night as I came in, put my bag down, and went straight to the fridge. Yeah, I said. You've been quiet lately. Just been busy. She tilted her head, as if searching for some hint of emotion in my expression. But I gave her nothing, just that new, patient silence, the kind that used to crush me. Now it empowered me. The next change came with my schedule. I stopped announcing things. I used to tell her when I'd be late, where I was going, if I was traveling for work. I used to keep her in the loop, not because she asked, but because I thought that's what partners do. But now she got what she gave. I left early in the mornings. Some days I didn't come home at all. I'd stay at the apartment or crash at a friend's place if I was working late on a project. She'd text, "Coming home tonight?" I'd reply, "Not this week. It's not my week to be home." The first time I said that, she didn't understand. Not your week? It rattled around in her head for a while before she finally replied, "What does that mean?" I never answered, because explaining would have given her clarity, and clarity was no longer my gift to her. One Friday, she called me 3 times back to back while I was at the gym. I didn't answer. When I got back to the apartment and opened my messages, there was one simple line waiting for me. "You're seriously not coming home this weekend?" I stared at it for a moment, then typed back, "Monthly check-in isn't until next week. Didn't you set that rule?" She left me on read for hours, but I knew she saw it. When I finally returned home for one of those monthly visits, I walked into a meticulously clean house. Candles flickered. She was wearing a soft robe I hadn't seen in a long time. Music played low from the Bluetooth speaker. She smiled when she saw me as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't been gone for almost 3 weeks. "Hey, stranger," she said, her voice light, her eyes trying to search mine. "Hey," I said, hanging my coat. "I made dinner." "That's nice." We sat, ate, talked a little about the news, work, the neighbor's dog. She tried to flirt. She reached for my hand across the table. I let her, but I didn't hold on, because now I was only there for my schedule, not hers, not ours. She started to unravel about a month later. The visits were too brief, too distant. I came and went like a landlord inspecting a property, polite, composed, detached. She couldn't pin me down anymore, couldn't read me. And for the first time since I'd known her, I saw something new in her expression: uncertainty. It terrified her. She asked more questions. Where are you staying? Are you seeing someone? Why are you acting like a guest in your own house? To all of them, I had one kind of response: flat, honest, unbothered, just doing what feels right. Or if I wanted to make her squirm, I'm respecting your pace. Because that's what it was, wasn't it? Her pace. She had set the tempo. One touch a month, one moment of affection here and there, one flicker of intimacy between endless weeks of silence. So I adjusted, and now she hated the very rhythm she had created. She began overcompensating. I'd show up to the house and find her suddenly glowing, hair done, lingerie folded on the bed like a stage prop, candles lit in the hallway, wine ready. "Stay the weekend," she'd whisper. I'd smile. "Can't. Early meeting." Her jaw would twitch, but she'd swallow it down. "Come to bed at least." "I'll crash on the couch. Don't want to keep you up." She tried asking softly one night, "Why are you doing this?" And I said, "You did it first." I just listened. Eventually, she couldn't bear it any longer. She broke. I came in one Friday night to grab some clothes. I wasn't planning to stay. She stood in the kitchen, arms folded, eyes red as if she'd been holding it in all day. "You can't keep doing this," she snapped. "Doing what?" "This. Disappearing. Coming and going like you don't live here. I don't even know who you are anymore." I tilted my head. "That makes two of us." She stepped closer, voice rising. "Are you punishing me for what I said? Is that what this is?" "No." "Then what the hell is it?" I didn't flinch. "It's me adjusting. You said you were comfortable with once a month, so I figured I'd give you that. One visit, one dinner, one weekend, once a month. Just like you wanted." She froze, because hearing her own words echoed back at her, that's when it finally hit her. She had thought she could ration affection without consequence. She had thought I would simply endure it. She never expected me to match her energy and beat her at her own game. Now she walks on eggshells every time I come home. She's extra careful, more dressed up, more polite, more desperate. But I don't come home for her. I come home for me. To remind myself that I survived the deepest rejection a man can feel, the slow erasure of being unwanted by the one person who once couldn't keep their hands off of you. And now she's the one checking her phone. She's the one wondering where I am. She's the one counting the days until I return. Not because she wants to love me, but because she knows now I don't need her anymore. It's funny how quickly people panic when they start getting a taste of their own medicine. Only it wasn't medicine for me. It was a cure. After months, maybe years, of being emotionally starved in my own house, something had finally shifted. And the shift wasn't loud or theatrical. It was subtle, cold, permanent. I wasn't punishing her. I was preserving me. The man who used to come home early just to spend time with her now arrived late and left early. The man who used to cook her favorite meals without her asking now ate alone or ordered out for one. The man who used to grab her hand on the couch, kiss her neck in the morning, bring her coffee in bed. He stopped reaching because she trained him not to. Every shrug, every turn away, every "not today," every cold, hollow bedtime conversation, or worse, the complete absence of one, had taught me a lesson I should have learned much earlier. When a woman stops cherishing your presence, your absence becomes a gift, so I gave it to her. Not with anger, not with games, but with dignity. I became the man I used to be before she dulled me, focused, disciplined, hard to reach. I threw myself into my work, my projects, my late-night reading, my physical training. I cleaned up my habits, stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes, hoping she had something to say that wasn't cold or dismissive. She rarely had anything to say before. Now she couldn't stop talking. "I barely see you anymore. I feel like I don't know what's going on in your life. Why don't you share anything with me? I used to dream of hearing those questions, used to wish she cared enough to wonder where I was or how I felt. Now that she finally did, I had nothing to say. Not out of spite, but because I genuinely didn't think of her anymore when I moved through my day. She had been a part of my routine, not because she deserved to be, but because I had included her, even when she excluded me. Now she was a guest in the parts of my life that mattered most. She tried to bring me back, made dinner more often, sat next to me on the couch, legs touching mine like old times, tried to laugh at my jokes again, the same jokes she used to ignore with that indifferent half smile. But I wasn't the same man. I didn't need that approval anymore. I didn't crave her attention like a starving dog waiting for scraps. I had tasted my own silence, my own focus, my own power, and I wasn't going to give that up to Playhouse with a woman who only wanted me now that I'd stopped chasing. One night she stood in the doorway of the guest room where I'd been sleeping for months. I was sitting on the edge of the bed tying my shoes before heading out for a late run. She lingered there as if she had something to say but couldn't decide how to say it. Finally she whispered, "Are we okay?" I stood up slowly and looked at her, really looked at her. She had tears in her eyes, maybe even remorse swimming in her voice. But I didn't feel the familiar ache in my chest. I didn't feel the urge to hold her or fix it or say, "Of course we are," because we weren't, and I didn't care enough to lie about it. I nodded once. "We're peaceful." Then I walked past her. She hated the silence. She hated that I didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't fight to be seen. Because that's what she was used to. A man who'd chase, a man who'd over-explain his pain, a man who'd stay loyal to the idea of her even when the reality of her was cold and dismissive. But I wasn't chasing anymore. I was becoming a ghost she couldn't hold, a version of me she barely recognized. And that terrified her. She started digging, checked my call logs, asked indirect questions about where I'd been, who I'd been with, why I was suddenly dressing better, walking with more confidence, posting less on social media. I didn't give her answers because she wasn't entitled to them anymore. She had forfeited that right when she made me feel like a nuisance for wanting connection. Now she wanted connection, and I was the one with my back turned. I remember one afternoon I came home from a weekend away. She had cooked again. Same setup. Wine, candles, soft music, nice clothes. She tried to pretend like things were normal, like we were fine. We weren't. And I had no intention of pretending we were. I grabbed a plate of food, thanked her politely, and sat on the far end of the couch. I watched the game on my phone. She tried to make conversation. I gave short, non-committal answers. And after 15 minutes of silence, she finally snapped, "Why are you treating me like a stranger?" I paused the video, set the phone down, and looked her straight in the eyes. And I simply stated, "Because that's precisely how you treated me for so long, and now, this is the stark reality of what we have become." Her jaw tightened. A tremor ran through her, and her eyes welled with unshed tears. She yearned to dispute, to explain, to salvage, but I offered no quarter. I rose, rinsed my plate, and retreated to the solitude of my bed, a choice I now embraced. People in their blissful ignorance cannot fathom the sheer, crushing weight of indifference until they've been its prolonged recipient. For an agonizing eternity, I had pleaded for her time, her touch, her very emotional presence. And what did she offer? Scraps, a rationed connection, doled out as if my existence were a mere inconvenience. Now the tables had turned. She was starved, ravenous for a mere fraction of the boundless affection I once freely poured upon her, and yet I felt no anger, no vindictive glee. I was simply done. Her texts began to trickle in during the day. "I miss you. Can we talk? Let's spend the weekend together, just us." Most went unanswered. When I did reply, it was with chilling brevity. "Busy. Maybe not this week." She was spiraling. a descent into a void she herself had meticulously carved. And I was soaring. The very air in the house felt different now. The silence that once suffocated me now offered a serene embrace. Her presence, once a suffocating blanket of anxiety, had faded into an indistinct background hum. She had, in a cruel twist of fate, become the very version of me she never believed she'd encounter. Ignored, unprioritized, disconnected. The profound difference? I uttered not a single syllable. She felt it. She felt it every time I entered a room and didn't inquire about her day, every time I departed without a word of farewell, every night I sought solace in the guest room without a flicker of hesitation. She felt what I had endured, only I had suffered in silent agony. Now she was forced to witness it. It was a swift, brutal awakening. She swiftly grasped the reins of control had slipped from her grasp. At first, she dismissed it. A phase, a need for space, perhaps even a calculated gambit to make a point. But with each passing day, the truth sharpened into an undeniable blade. I wasn't teaching a lesson. I wasn't patiently awaiting her transformation. I was gone. Not physically, not yet. But emotionally, mentally, I had already packed my bags and walked away from the man who once adored her. And then her tactic shifted. A desperate, almost theatrical transformation began. She started dressing up again, not just occasionally but relentlessly. Full hair, meticulous makeup on a mundane Tuesday night, donning fitted clothes merely to watch television, the lingering scent of perfume in the air before I even arrived home, despite having no plans to venture out. It was jarring, unnatural to witness this woman, who once lived in oversized sweatshirts for days on end, who barely bothered with a glance in the mirror some mornings, suddenly reclaim a forced glamour. Of course I noticed. How could I not? But I offered no compliment, no crumb of validation to feed this performance. I simply nodded and went about my business. Then came the food. For months, her fingers had barely grazed a pot or pan in the kitchen. We'd either order in or I'd find myself cooking. Half the time she'd pick at her plate, feigning a lack of appetite. But now she cooked almost every night, full, elaborate meals. Not just food, effort. The table meticulously set, napkins folded, wine chilled, candles casting a soft glow. "Dinner's ready," she'd announce, that familiar, almost forgotten lilt in her voice. The one she used back when our world still held a semblance of shared joy. I would sit, eat, even offer a quiet compliment on the seasoning. Then I'd clear my plate, rinse it in the sink, and return to my room. Not cold, not cruel, just unreachable. Because I now knew the biting sting of being treated like an obligation, and I would not grant her the hollow victory of believing she could lure me back with a warm meal and a manufactured smile. Then the text resumed, small at first. "Good morning," a solitary red heart. "Hope your day is going well. Just thinking of you." Little digital echoes of the intimacy she once rationed. The same woman who had left my messages unread for days on end now replied within seconds. For what? To ignite a spark? To gauge if I still cared? To test if the leash she once wrapped around my neck still held its taut pull? It didn't. She grew bolder. One night I returned home late from my apartment. She met me at the door, clad in lingerie I hadn't seen since our honeymoon. Her perfume, heavy and sweet, hung in the hallway. The lights were dimmed and soft jazz murmured from the speakers. I said nothing at first, merely walked past her, setting my keys on the counter. She followed. "Maybe you want to stay in tonight?" she ventured. I turned, met her gaze, and gave her a look that conveyed everything I felt no need to articulate. She waited, desperate for a reaction, anything. Instead, I asked, "Do you remember the last time you truly touched me? Not out of obligation, not because I asked, but because you genuinely wanted to." Her eyes dropped. I nodded slowly. "Exactly. Then I walked to the guest room and quietly shut the door. She did not follow. Her attempts, however, persisted. She relentlessly tried to initiate conversations, inquired about my work, manufactured laughter at my most mundane remarks. She even started calling me babe again, as if the mere sound of the word could rewind the clock. It couldn't. You cannot unburn a bridge by merely pretending it was never consumed by flames. One evening in the kitchen, while I was washing dishes, she tried to flirt. She slid up behind me, her arms encircling my waist, her head resting against my back. For a fleeting moment, I closed my eyes, not out of longing, but because I was transported back to countless nights I had stood exactly like this, utterly alone, while she watched television, while she drifted to sleep without a good night, while I yearned for closeness and received only silence. And now she reached for a man who had painstakingly learned to exist without her. I gently removed her hands from my body and simply said, "Not today." She flinched as if I had struck her. I did not look back. She began to cry more frequently after that. I'd catch her wiping her face in the bathroom mirror, or sitting alone in the hallway, staring blankly at the television, her eyes brimming with tears. But I did not rush to her side. I remembered my own tears shed in those very same rooms in crushing silence, met with utter apathy. I remembered lying in bed, feeling utterly invisible as she scrolled through her phone beside me. I remembered begging with my very presence and being denied by her absence. So now I let her sit with the emptiness she had once so generously bestowed upon me. One day she shattered completely. I was packing a small bag for a weekend at my apartment. She stood in the doorway, her arms trembling, eyes puffy and red. "Why are you doing this?" she choked out. "Doing what?" I asked, zipping the bag. "Acting like you don't care." I met her gaze, calm, unshaken. "I'm not acting." She took a step forward. "Please don't go. We can talk. I miss you." I nodded. "I used to miss you too." "I didn't know what I was doing," she pleaded. "You did," I stated, my voice even. "You just didn't care." A raw, guttural sob tore from her throat, but I did not flinch. I walked past her, stopped at the door, and said, "You taught me how to live without you. I just finally learned." Then I left. The unvarnished truth was, her efforts were never born of love. They were born of a terrifying realization, the loss of power, the chilling sensation of me slipping through her grasp, of understanding that she was no longer the epicenter of my world, no longer the priority, no longer the coveted prize. She craved the old me back, the man who texted her every morning, who meticulously planned dates, who cooked, who kissed her forehead and inquired about her woes when she sighed at dinner. But she was unwilling to become the woman who earned that version of me again. She naively believed that makeup and a forced smile could erase months of icy silence and callous denial. But I had already journeyed through hell and forged a fragile peace with its inferno. It happened on a Thursday night. I had been gone for 6 days. No explanation, no promises of return, no texts save for a terse "all good" after she inquired about my whereabouts. That was all she received now, a mirror of what she had so readily offered me. The man who once returned home promptly, who kissed her neck at the door, who prepared dinner and asked about her day, now entered like a mere tenant, quiet, controlled, utterly unbothered. And that night she finally broke. I walked into the house just before 10:00 p.m., weary from the road, my bag slung over one shoulder. I kicked off my shoes by the door, flicked on the hallway light, and stepped into the kitchen. She was there, perched at the counter, still in her work clothes. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes a raw, telltale red. She had been waiting, not like before, not passively, not indifferently. This was different. The air crackled with a palpable tension. I poured a glass of water without a word. Her voice, when it came, was a fragile whisper. You're really just gonna walk in like this? Like this isn't normal? I took a sip, set the glass down. It is normal, I replied. Her eyebrows drew together, her lips parted as if she couldn't comprehend my words. You've been gone almost a week, Ryan. I nodded. I know. And you don't think that's a problem? I met her gaze, calm, level, utterly cold. I didn't hear you complain when you disappeared emotionally for over a year, when you rationed my presence, my touch, my heart to once a month. She shot to her feet, as if my words had physically struck her. That's not fair. Isn't it? I countered. You're not even trying to fix things. I tilted my head. You mean like I used to? When I brought you flowers and you rolled your eyes? When I kissed you and you turned away? When I sat on this very couch begging for connection and you told me to grow up? You mean like that? Her mouth opened but no sound emerged. Please don't do this, she whispered. But I wasn't doing anything. I was simply reflecting back the very energy she had given me for so long. Only now she was finally awake enough to feel its icy grip. She stepped forward, her hands trembling. I don't know what's going on with you, but I swear I feel like you're seeing someone. There it was, the desperation, always surfacing when logic failed. I'm not, I stated simply. She looked stunned that I didn't vehemently defend myself. You don't touch me, you barely look at me, you come and go like I'm not even here. What am I supposed to think? I took another sip of water, calm, silent. Then I said, once a month, right? Her body stiffened. What? I set the glass down and walked past her. You said once a month was enough. That was your standard. That was what you decided a husband should be worth. And now you're angry I gave you what you asked for. She turned to face me fully now, her voice rising, panic thick in her tone. That's not what I meant. I was stressed, I was tired, I didn't know how else to say. You knew exactly what you were saying, I cut in. You said it without blinking, without thinking twice. And when I tried to explain how it made me feel, you shut me down. So I adjusted. Tears now streamed freely from her eyes. Actual, full tears, not the silent ones I used to glimpse from a distance. I'm sorry, she whispered. And that was the crucial point. I believe she was sorry, but not for the right reasons. She wasn't sorry she had said it. She was sorry it had worked. She was sorry she no longer held the reins of control. She was sorry the man who once begged for her time was now meticulously rationing his. I've changed, she said, stepping closer, her hands clasped in a desperate plea. I see that, I replied. Then why are you still so cold? I took a long, steady breath, not angry, just utterly spent. Because cold is all I've known from you for the last year, and now that I've learned to live in the cold, I don't feel the need to run toward warmth that only appears when it's convenient. She covered her mouth, sobbing quietly now. I didn't know you were hurting that bad. You didn't ask, I said. You didn't want to know. I looked her up and down, this woman I had loved, cherished, waited for, wept over. I begged for you, I said, every night, in the silence, in the spaces where love was supposed to reside, and all you gave me was distance. Now you want to hold me when I've already let go. Her knees literally buckled. I'd always heard of it happening in books or movies, but here it was real. She sank to the floor, covering her face, and uttered the words that once would have shattered me. Please don't give up on us. I crouched down, not to embrace her, but merely to meet her at eye level, and I said calmly, You gave up a long time ago. You just didn't expect me to follow. Then I stood, walked down the hallway, and shut the door behind me. I felt no triumph. This was not victory. This was closure. Because when someone teaches you that your presence is optional, you stop offering it. When someone treats your deepest desires as an inconvenience, you cease desiring them. And when someone truly believes you'll always be there, no matter how many times they utter "not today," you leave without a goodbye, and that in itself is the most profound farewell. The insidious truth about sympathy is that it possesses a tenacious memory. You cannot starve someone for years and then, when they finally stop feeding you, suddenly cry victim. But that was precisely the desperate charade she attempted to orchestrate. It began subtly, little asides dropped during brunch with her sister or in hushed phone calls with old college friends. At first they were veiled, the kind of half-truths that sound innocuous until you view the complete damning picture. He's been so cold lately, I don't even know where he goes anymore. It's like he just shut down out of nowhere. I didn't care at first. I understood the mechanics. She had to offer some explanation. People were bound to notice the seismic shift eventually. The dinner party invitations we used to accept as a couple, now declined by her alone. The Sunday family lunches I no longer attended. The posts she liked but never commented on, the ones where friends tagged me, smiling, peaceful, miles away from the woman who used to declare "not tonight" as if it were a sacred ritual. So naturally, she needed to account for the growing chasm, but she hadn't anticipated what came next, because the very people she confided in, they remembered things too. Her best friend Sarah, who had once pulled me aside at a barbecue and confessed, "I don't know how you deal with her sometimes, Ryan. You're a good man. Don't lose yourself." Or her sister Rachel, who had once dared to ask her in front of me why she always looked so annoyed when I attempted to show affection. Even her mother, who had witnessed me spend 2 uninterrupted hours fixing a clogged sink in her kitchen one Thanksgiving, while her daughters scrolled Instagram in the adjacent room. People noticed, even when she believed their gaze was elsewhere, and now her desperate pleas for support echoed in rooms filled with people who had witnessed the unvarnishing truth unfold in real time. It wasn't long before she realized the well was bone dry. The wave of validation she expected, the sympathetic, "Oh no, he's being distant," or the outraged, "What a jerk, you poor thing," never materialized. Instead, she began to hear uncomfortable truths. One of her friends, Nina, apparently remarked, "Maybe he's just reacting to how you treated him. I remember you used to brush him off all the time." Her cousin Michael was even more blunt. "You told me once that you were done being touched. Now you're mad he doesn't want to come home. Sounds like you're getting what you asked for." Even her sister, the one she trusted most, offered a knowing look and said, "Rachel, I love you, but let's not pretend you didn't push him away first." And that was the genesis of her isolation. The inherent problem with telling only your side of the story is that sometimes people have already heard the other side from your own mouth. The years of eye rolls, the biting, sarcastic comments, the way she used to complain about men always needing attention. It all came flooding back to her in whispers, in stares, in the agonizingly awkward pauses during conversations she once effortlessly controlled, and it struck her with a force far greater than any blow I could have inflicted. I never told anyone anything. I never had to. That was the exquisite beauty of it, the silent revenge. I didn't go around denigrating her. I didn't post cryptic quotes online. I didn't text mutual friends, whispering tales of her misdeeds. I simply lived. I healed. I detached. And people noticed. The same way they noticed her slow, agonizing unraveling. She called me one afternoon after a visit to her mother's house. "You've been talking to people," she accused, her voice edged with fury. I was in the middle of a workout. "No, I haven't," I replied, my tone calm, collected. "Then why does everyone act like I'm the bad guy?" I said nothing. She waited, and when I offered no response, she snapped, "Are you seriously just letting everyone turn on me?" That's when I spoke the truth that hung unspoken between us for so long. You turned on me first. I just stopped protecting the version of you that they used to believe in. Dead silence, because she knew it was true. For a long, agonizing time, I had defended her, even when she deserved no defense. I would lie for her when she bailed on plans. I would concoct excuses when people questioned why she never seemed happy, uttering platitudes like, she's just tired or she has a lot going on. But now I simply allowed people to draw their own conclusions, and they did. She stopped receiving invitations to certain gatherings. Some friends began calling me directly, bypassing her entirely. Her family, once a chorus of opinionated voices, suddenly fell silent when she dared to mention my name. And that silence, it was louder than any insult, because it meant even they no longer believed her. She attempted one last desperate spin. She posted an old photograph of us online with the caption, "You can do everything for someone and still not be enough." I received a handful of messages that day from people we both knew. One simply said, "That's rich coming from her." Another replied, "Took you long enough to walk away." And then a profound realization dawned upon me. Her manipulation had not just failed, it had spectacularly backfired. Because people weren't foolish. They had watched the cracks form, they had seen who showed up, they remembered who smiled through rejection and who sat with arms crossed while love crumbled into dust. I believe the part that truly broke her wasn't losing me. It was the crushing realization that she couldn't rewrite the ending. She couldn't play the victim in a story where far too many people already knew the raw, unvarnished truth. She thought people would pity her, but instead, they pitied the man she lost. And by then, so did she. People mistakenly believe the most potent revenge is something loud, a dramatic act of retaliation that brings down the entire house. But true power, true revenge is peace. And when I finally irrevocably detached from her, truly and fully, that peace arrived like a luminous sunrise after a long sleepless night. There was no grand announcement, no dramatic breakup speech, no desperate ultimatum. I didn't pack my bags and slam the door. I simply began letting go, piece by agonizing piece. It began with my mind. I stopped obsessing over her capricious moods. I stopped wondering about her thoughts, ceased dissecting every sigh, every eye roll, every not tonight. I stopped foolishly hoping that today would be the day she softened, reached for me, or whispered something resembling love. I no longer needed it, because I had discovered something infinitely more profound: self-respect. Then came the physical detachment. I started spending more time away, not out of bitterness, but organically, naturally. I would leave in the mornings before she awoke, stopping for coffee alone, heading to work with a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't dragging my feet anymore. I wasn't in mere survival mode. I was clear. At the office, my performance soared. Meetings that once bored me now felt engaging. Projects I had once procrastinated on transformed into exciting opportunities. Promotions I had bypassed, constantly attempting to salvage our broken home, were now mine for the taking. People noticed. My boss pulled me aside one Friday and said, "I don't know what changed, but keep doing it. You look 10 years lighter." And he was right. I was lighter, because I had finally shed the suffocating weight of a marriage that only I had been carrying. At night, I took long walks, not aimless wanderings, but intentional, quiet pilgrimages. I would stroll through neighborhoods I didn't inhabit, gazing at homes illuminated with the warm glow of laughter and genuine affection. Not because I was bitter, but because I was meticulously rediscovering what I wanted again, what I truly deserved. I resumed journaling. I immersed myself in books that had absolutely nothing to do with fixing relationships or deciphering emotional distance. I rediscovered me. And the strangest thing happened during that season. I felt joy again. Not the kind that bursts through the door with fanfare, but the kind that hums softly in the background. A steady, dependable peace. And her? She remained in the house. a house now enveloped by the very coldness she had inflicted upon me. Now she was the one constantly checking her phone, wondering if I'd come home. Now she was the one asking, "How was your day?" receiving only a polite half smile in return. Now she was the one watching me walk through the door, unsure if I would stay or vanish again in the morning. She didn't yell, she didn't hurl accusations anymore, because she could feel it, the detachment. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't a calculated tactic. It was real. I had simply stopped trying to make her love me, and the space that abandonment created became my sanctuary. Eventually, I met someone, not because I was actively searching, but because I was finally open in ways I hadn't been when I was desperately clinging to something dead. She was kind, curious, simple. She didn't demand attention, she offered it freely. She didn't roll her eyes when I spoke. She leaned in, truly listening. She didn't ration herself as if affection were a privilege. She gave without a scoreboard, without calculation. It wasn't love at first sight. It was respect at first word. And it was a profound, life-altering reminder that intimacy didn't have to feel like begging. Let me be unequivocally clear. I did not cheat. I did not betray her in the way she had emotionally betrayed me, silently, by shutting down without explanation. But emotionally, I was already gone. So when this new woman entered my life, it wasn't a comparison. It was a stark contrast. She didn't have to be extraordinary to shine. She simply had to be present, and that alone made her feel like pure sunlight. I didn't parade this new connection. I didn't post photos or introduce her to friends prematurely. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wasn't trying to boast. I was simply happy, quietly, deeply, consistently. And the happier I became, the more I witnessed the walls closing in around my wife. She saw it too. She saw it in the way I walked, upright, resolute, confident. She heard it in my voice, calm, unshaken, devoid of that desperate edge I used to carry when I pleaded to be understood. She noticed it in my eyes, no longer frantically scanning her for warmth. She was no longer the center of my orbit. She wasn't even on my map. She tried once to inquire about the change. We were sitting at the kitchen table, early morning, sipping coffee. Silence hung between us, not angry, just profoundly unfamiliar. "Can I ask you something?" she ventured. I looked up. "Yeah?" "You seem better." I nodded. "I am." "What changed?" I didn't answer immediately. I wanted to be kind. I didn't want to utterly crush her. But I also wouldn't lie. So I said, "I stopped needing what you wouldn't give. And once I stopped needing it, I realized I was never the problem." She blinked hard, her lips parting as if she had something to say, but there was nothing left to defend. Because her silence had spoken for years, and now mine was simply the echo. I didn't destroy her. I didn't take the house. I didn't seek to hurt her. I didn't hurl her past mistakes in her face at every opportunity. I simply detached. And while I rose, quietly and without permission, she remained trapped in the cold wall she had built. Alone in the silence she once offered me nightly. And now she sat there, desperately hoping for a sliver of warmth from a man she once told, "Once a month is enough." It was quiet the day she finally broke. No screaming, no ultimatums, no furious kitchen arguments or hurled accusations. Just the low, almost imperceptible hum of the air conditioner in the background, the rhythmic ticking of a wall clock, and the desolate sound of a woman realizing, far too late, that everything she once took for granted had already slipped through her grasp. I had just walked in from work, the same way I always did, calm, grounded, neither eager nor bitter, simply existing. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands clasped as if in prayer, her eyes glassy, shoulders hunched. She had been crying. I could tell by the redness beneath her eyes and the subtle puffiness in her cheeks. I poured a glass of water, took a sip, and leaned against the counter. She stared at me for a moment, then finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Are you really leaving? I didn't answer immediately. I wanted to. Not out of cruelty, but out of absolute clarity. This moment demanded truth, not avoidance, not sugarcoating. So I nodded. Yes. She looked down at her hands, her lips trembling. Is there someone else? I shook my head. No, there's just me. Her brows furrowed. What does that mean? It means I finally chose myself. She stood slowly and walked toward me, her bare feet making soft, almost pleading sounds against the tile. I know I was wrong, she whispered. I know I pushed you away. I was stressed, I was tired, I was in a bad place, and I took it out on you. I kept my eyes on her, steady. I didn't mean it when I said that about once a month. But you said it, I replied gently, and you meant it in that moment. You said it without hesitation, without a second thought. That's who you were. Her tears broke free then, trailing down her face like rainfall. But I've changed, I've tried, I'm trying. I see that, I said. But change doesn't erase history, and healing doesn't always bring someone back. She stepped closer. I'll do anything, she pleaded. Please don't go. And for a fleeting moment I saw the woman I used to know. The softness, the vulnerability, the openness I had begged for all those nights she had rolled over and turned her back to me. Now she was finally looking at me, finally seeing me, finally begging. But the problem with regret is that it carries no weight when it arrives at the wrong door. I set the glass down and stood straighter. You know what I used to dream of? I asked. She blinked, her eyes wide. I used to dream of you looking at me like that, of you reaching for me, of you saying I miss you without me having to break myself in half just to be noticed. I know, she sobbed harder. I know that now. I used to want so badly for you to just meet me halfway, to hug me when I walked through the door, to say I love you first, to touch me without being asked, to treat me like more than someone who paid bills and took out the trash. I was selfish, she choked out. I shook my head. No, you were indifferent, and that's worse. She dropped to her knees just as she had before, but this time I didn't flinch. I didn't crouch down to meet her there, because I wasn't broken anymore and I didn't belong on the floor. She gripped my jeans, sobbing, clinging. I can be better. I can give you more. I just didn't know what I had. I thought you'd always be here. And there it was, the sentence every man hears too late. I thought you would always be here. The most dangerous assumption in any relationship, that someone who gives consistently will never stop giving, that someone who stays through the silence will never walk away, that loyalty is infinite, no matter how many times you say, not today. I gently stepped back and knelt to her level, but this time to speak one final unyielding truth. I looked her dead in the eyes, my gaze soft yet solid, and said, I gave you everything. You gave me once a month. Her body collapsed inward, shaking from the crushing weight of that sentence. I'm sorry, she whispered. I forgive you, I replied. And I did, not for her, for me. Because forgiveness was never about her making things right. It was about me no longer needing anything from her. I stood up, walked to the door, and grabbed the bag I had packed earlier. It wasn't heavy, just clothes, a toothbrush, a few books. All I really needed. She didn't move. She stayed there on the floor, sobbing into her hands, her world crumbling beneath her, the same way mine had once done while she scrolled through her phone and dismissively said, You're being dramatic now. There were no words left, no fights to have, no more months to wait for a change that arrived far too late. As I opened the door, I turned back one last time and said, I hope you find peace. Then I left. No fireworks, no anger, no regret, just silence. The kind of silence I used to beg her to fill. Now it was mine, and it was beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, since you've listened to the end of this story, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments which state you're watching from. Let's see what percentage of elite viewers make it to the end. And please kindly turn your attention to the screen after this message. There you'll find a full playlist of thrilling stories, a subscribe button for the channel, and our most captivating story. Click, enjoy, and thank you.